So I'm taking a third again from this. And then that last third that you'll have waiting there is going to be for the neck of the vase and the base of this vase, including the rim, that whole area. So there's a third right there. And here we go. It's the same process. Oops, my hands are getting dirty. I need to wash them. If I don't, then these little pieces of clay are going to deposit onto my piece. And when that happens, it's really aggravating because it creates all of these bumps on my clay. Often my students will say, oh my gosh, I went and cleaned it and then look what happened. And they don't understand why. So I know it sounds so weird, but always work with clean hands. And you're not going to mess up your work. So I'm just rolling this into a rough sphere. Putting my thumb from the center, pushing down. And I'm turning it round and round, starting at the bottom, always at the bottom, staying at that bottom. And turning. Sorry guys, I'm a little tired today. I've been teaching all day, showing this to many classes. And my hand is hurting from making so many pinch pots. So I'm just going to use my left hand here. Helps being a little bit of a ambidextrous when you're in ceramics. You become more that way as you go. You'll see. All right, I'm seeing some stretch marks here starting. So I'm going to take a little water and smooth. And then I'm going to continue as soon as I can. Now, at this point, I'm going to start looking at this, comparing it to my other container to see how much I should widen it or make it smaller to go together. I can see that I'm getting pretty close on this. It's a little bit bigger, but not much. Now I'm going to have to show you though what happens with a lot of my students. I think I'm going to show that to you right now. For a lot of my students, they will make the rim too thin. You want to keep this rim to about 1/4 inch. So this is about perfect. If you make it smaller than that, you will not be able to score this part with this part because they won't fit together. So what you need to do is add a coil between. I think because this one right here is a little bit off, that would be a good one to show you that kind of thing. Because probably out of my students, I would say probably 30% of them have issues making this too thin, or it's so off on different areas that they need to add a coil. So if you did both containers and they turned out perfectly like that, beautiful, then you don't need to add a coil. But if you did have a little bit of trouble, like my 60 out of 200 students that make it too thin, then you will need to add a coil there. It's very, very important because what it's going to give you is strength to the clay. The thickness really equals strength in this clay. The reason that I made this example so thick at the top is especially because I'm using air dry clay. And air dry clay, since we don't fire it, it's not as strong as clay that you would fire. Remember, I had a teacher at Glendale College, and he really prided himself, he said, in making his pieces very, very thin at the top. He felt that that showed that he was very much a professional. And then this huge earthquake happened, the 1991 earthquake, to be exact, in California. And his pieces were all destroyed, except for the thick ones, the thick-rimmed ones that he made when he was first starting out. So that made him realize that it was important to make a thicker rim, not too thin of a rim when you create things, because they just last so much better. So now that I've made this coil rolling in my palms, not in the tips of my fingers, you saw with me right here. That's why I have my fingers up like this, so it doesn't touch the clay. That's really important because then you don't get the finger marks on it. Also, when I'm rolling, I start in the middle and then I pull slowly to the sides to lengthen it on the sides. All right, now I'm going to score. For air dry clay, you need to score after you wet it. For regular clay, you probably won't need to. So now I'm going to just score. I always say to my students, X's and pluses. So these are the X's and these are the pluses. So I'm going down and then across. Basically, I want to score it deeply so that you can see a big shadow in there. And I want to not see where I'm starting this these drawings of these lines in here, or embedding of the lines, because there's just so much. And now I'm going to go ahead and score this part. So if you want to make the piece bigger or smaller to meet the other bowl, let's look at another problem that happens with my students. They'll end up with something like this, where the bottom is this size, the top area is smaller. So in that case, what they're going to do, or what you're going to do, is you're going to score on the outside here of the rim. On the outside, X's and pluses. I'm not going to do the whole thing here because this is actually from a student. They want to see it tomorrow morning. And then I'm going to add, after I do my X's and pluses, I'm going to add this piece here, kind of on the corner, on the edge here. And then when I put it together, it's going to fit. So that's very, very important for students or people who have made the container, the top too big, or the top too small. Actually, the top too big. If the top was too big, then you would put, and you want to make it smaller, then you would score inside this area, and then you would add the clay piece inside the container and attach it. You can always use that ledge as a way to decorate. So if I do end up, well, I'll show you in just a minute, but if I do end up with a bump there, I can always put a stamp there, make it really, really cool. Ceramics, a lot of it is going with the flow, going with what happens as you're working. You can go against that, but sometimes it's nice if you go with it. Sometimes it's actually an improvement if you go with it. So now I'm going to wet this edge. Now, when I'm wetting this edge, I am not pushing the scoring places down. A lot of my students take their fingers and they wipe back and forth and get rid of those little divots that they actually made for the purpose of bringing these pieces together. So don't do that, please, please, guys. Please, everyone. I'm washing my hands because I'm getting little pieces of clay on them, and that's going to end up marring my project here. All right, let me look. Yeah, this is nice and smoothed. This one really needs a little more smoothing. Got to make sure that this is clean, because if it has pieces of clay on it, then it's going to ruin my piece. Again, for air dry clay, you'll need to add a little water. Wash on, wash off. Think about it being just like the Karate Kid. You're doing a circle, really more of a circle than anything else. This is the best time to get this relatively smooth, simply because you're going to be closing up this container in just a moment, making that kind of egg. There we go. I want to make this a little shorter, so I think I'm going to stop the smoothing because I really need to finish this up for you guys so I can get in that 15-minute time slot there. Okay, so smoothing enough for now.